ಕೇಂದ್ರ ವರಮಾನ ಕಾರ್ಯದರ್ಶಿಗಳು ಶ್ರೀ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಹಸ್ಮುಖ್ ಆದಿಯಾರ್ ಅವರೇ, ನಮ್ಮ ಅಪರ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಕಾರ್ಯದರ್ಶಿಗಳು ಶ್ರೀ ಪ್ರಸಾದ್ ರವರು, ಶ್ರೀ ವಿನೋದ್ ಕುಮಾರ್ ರವರು ಹಾಗೂ ನಮ್ಮ ಆಯುಕ್ತರು ಶ್ರೀ ರಿತ್ವಿಕ್ ಪಾಂಡೆ ಅವರೇ, ಆಗಮಿಸಿರುವ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ಜಿಎಸ್ಟಿ ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕವನ್ನು ಪ್ರತಿನಿಧಿಸತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಸೌಭಾಗ್ಯ ನನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿಗೆ ಕಳೆದ ಒಂದು 8 ತಿಂಗಳಿಂದ ಒದಗಿ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಮುಖ್ಯಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳು ನಮ್ಮ ಹಿರಿಯ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಸಮಾಲೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಈ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿಯನ್ನ ನನ್ನ ಮೇಲೆ ಭರವಸೆ ಇಟ್ಟು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದು ಒಂದು ನನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿನ ಸೌಭಾಗ್ಯ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಭಾವಿಸಿಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಾಂವಿಧಾನಿಕ ವಿಚಾರಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನನ್ನನ್ನು ನಾನು ತೊಡಗಿಸಿಕೊಂಡು 4-6 ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನು ಕಲಿಯತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಅವಕಾಶ ಈ ಜಿಎಸ್ಟಿ ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲ್ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ನನಗೆ ಒದಗಿ ಬಂದಿದ್ದು ನನ್ನ ರಾಜಕೀಯ ಜೀವನದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಕಲೀಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ. ಈ ಸಂಪೂರ್ಣ ಆಡಳಿತ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ತಕ್ಕಂತಹ ಹಾಗೂ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಚಾರಗಳ ಮಂಥನ ಮಾಡತಕ್ಕಂಥ, ಕಾನೂನನ್ನ ರೂಪಿಸ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಅವಕಾಶ, ಕಲಿಯತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಕೊಡುಗೆಯನ್ನ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ನಾನು ಕಲಿತಿದ್ದು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಭಾವಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ನಮ್ಮ ಮುಖ್ಯಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳು ಮಾಡಿಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತು ಜಿಎಸ್ಟಿ ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲ್ನ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರಾದಂಥ ಕೇಂದ್ರ ಹಣಕಾಸು ಸಚಿವರು ಶ್ರೀಯುತ ಅರುಣ್ ಜೈಟ್ಲಿ ಅವರು, ಶ್ರೀಯುತ ಹಸ್ಮುಖ್ ಆದಿಯಾ ಅವರ ಸಹಕಾರದೊಂದಿಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಬಹಳ ಪ್ರಜಾಸತ್ತಾತ್ಮಕವಾಗಿ, ಬಹಳ ಡೆಮೊಕ್ರಾಟಿಕ್ ಆಗಿ ಅದನ್ನ ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸಣ್ಣ ರಾಜ್ಯ, ದೊಡ್ಡ ರಾಜ್ಯ ಅಂತ ಯಾರನ್ನೂ ಸಹ ನಿರ್ಲಕ್ಷ್ಯ ಮಾಡದೆ ಎಲ್ಲರ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯಗಳನ್ನು ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಂಡು ಆದಷ್ಟು ಒಮ್ಮತವನ್ನ ಮೂಡಿಸುವುದರ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಈ ಕಾನೂನಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಸಹ ಭಾಗಿಯಾಗ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಂದ್ರ ಸರ್ಕಾರವು ಸಹ ನಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನಾನು ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಗುರುತಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬಯಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಇನ್ನು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಆದಿಯಾ ಅವರು ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ವಿವರಗಳನ್ನ ಅವರೇ ಒದಗಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಿಮ್ಮಿಂದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳು ಬರುವಾಗ ಯಾವ ಒಂದು ತುಡಿತ ಇತ್ತು ಈ ಸಭಾಂಗಣದಲ್ಲಿ, ಅವರು ಮಾತಾಡಿ ಮುಗಿಸಿದ ನಂತರ ಆ ತುಡಿತ ಎಲ್ಲ ತಾನಾಗಿ ಸಮಾಧಾನಕರವಾಗಿ ಆಗುವಂತೆ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಆದಿಯಾ ಅವರು ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ತಮ್ಮ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅನೇಕ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಸಮಾಧಾನಕರವಾಗಿ ಉತ್ತರ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ನಾನು ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ಆ ವಿವರಗಳಿಗೆ ಹೋಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ವಿವರಗಳ ರಹಿತವಾದಂತ ಕೆಲವು 4 ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ತಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬಯಸ್ತೇನೆ. ದಿ ಲಾಂಗ್ ಟರ್ಮ್ ಆಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ GST is to lead the nation towards a better and a larger economy. As you are all aware, I am perhaps repeating things that you are already aware. Though we are one nation, indirect taxation in our country varies from state to state and sometimes within state because of octroi and entry tax and other such provisions. So this makes it very difficult for businesses to operate, to understand, and to thrive in a very complex taxation structure. So, as we step aggressively towards a very serious global economy, we need to take ourselves very seriously. And if we have to become a serious, thriving economy, one of the things that is necessary from a policy environment point of view is a certain sense of uniformity across the country, certain sense of clarity in understanding of doing business within the country. So without that, as long as our structures remain very complicated, compliance becomes challenging. And the easier thing to do when compliance is challenging is not to comply. So if we want a cleaner system, a complicated system is an impediment for a cleaner system also. A complicated, varied system is also an impediment for competitiveness. If we don't have competitiveness within the country, how will we develop competitiveness across the borders? We can't develop, because each state has got its own different rates, and input tax credit doesn't cross the border, so competitiveness is affected. So as we move towards a serious global economy, which wants a strong domestic economy, but an economy which also wants to play a role in the world, we must rationalize, we must bring in uniformity, we must bring in a common understanding, and we must try to have a uniform structure across the country. So this is the aspiration of GST. With this idea, GST was mooted 10, 12 years ago, and it has taken that many years for us to develop political consensus ultimately. The idea has been with us for more than 10 years. But as you know, we are a federal structure. In the past, many states were not willing, though there was a lot of pressure from the center. But in subsequent years, we have all now come to understand that GST, a uniform system, is necessary. So that's a major milestone we crossed, as Dr. Adhia said, through the constitutional amendment. Subsequent to the constitutional amendment, the team of officers, I must repeat, have done a commendable job in coming up with the necessary legislations to actualize the constitutional amendment. And the deliberations in the GST Council, I must make an observation about that also. I was surprised myself. That is why I also said I have taken more out of GST than I've actually contributed, because there has been so much to learn because of the high quality of discussions and deliberations within the GST Council. A lot of it is not reflected outside. But believe me when I say the deliberations within the GST Council have been of top quality, have been very nuanced, have been very detail-oriented, and have been very analytical wherever data has been available. Yes, oftentimes there are issues we raise out of some emotional attachment. But when the discussion takes place, normally, by and large, the decision veers towards what is rational. And the deliberations within the council, because it is not open to majority of our countrymen, perhaps you are not aware, but the deliberations have been of a very tremendous quality. And that's why I say and I repeat that actually I have learned so much from fellow finance ministers from different states, and also from the senior officers and many junior officers who have been working in the GST Council. So I want to just assure you that a lot of issues that you have raised have been deliberated. Some decisions may be to your liking and many decisions may not be to your liking. The intention was not to arrive at that decision to cause you to not like it, but it has been arrived at keeping in mind a lot of facts. Now I will give you a quick example. What do I mean by that? Each state has got its own different VAT rates. Some states have altogether exempted some businesses. Some states are charging a 5% VAT, and some states are charging for the same business 14.5% in some states. So obviously, in a state where the VAT incidence was 14.5% and central excise was either 5% or 12%, there that service has moved into 18% category, or business has moved into 18% category. But in a state where it was either at 5% or even exempt, there you would see that suddenly it has gone into 18% or 12%. You feel aghast at it. But it is not being done so irrationally. What the GST Council has done is taken, as Dr. Adhiya said already, a weighted average of incidence of taxation across all states. And subsequently, based on the weighted average rate, a service or good has been fit into a certain category. 99% this rule has been adhered to in most services and goods. Only in a few select commodities we have actually played with a few goods or services by either bringing them down to a lower level or taking them up. Very few. And let me also assure you, the GST Council is soon going to bring out, I think, a sort of a primer on this. The general rate of incidence of taxation, an entire weighted average if we do, of all the basket of all commodities, I will assure you that the general rate of taxation will actually come down in our country. Whether it gets passed on to the consumer is not is another issue. Council is also deliberating. There is a non-profiteering clause in the Act itself, and we are going to see how to enforce the Non-Profiteering Act so that the lowering of the rate is actually passed on to the consumer. That also is being addressed by the Council. But coming back to the point, the general rate of taxation, it is intended to come down. So then you would be obviously thinking, if the rate of taxation comes down, what is government going to do about its revenues? So hence it cannot be true. No, that point has also been addressed. We are hoping that with a cleaner system, where compliance is easier, we are hoping that more and more people will comply, and hence revenues will go up. That is the logic through which we are trying to work. And compared to the previous regime, few more commodities have been exempted in the proposed regime. Few commodities have been lowered. Very few commodities where the rates have actually gone up. Of course, my friends in the media or in commentators, oftentimes, as he gave an example, in Karnataka, for example, I have seen housing sector, construction sector being discussed. There have been articles that the construction prices would go up because of GST. Now, as Dr. Adhiya explained, I cannot understand why there is a rationale for construction prices to go up, when actually the rate of incidence, net incidence of taxation is going to come down. Yes, there may be a state where previous rate of incidence was lower, and now with the weighted average rate, maybe there is an increase in the rate of taxation in some state. But that could be limited to that state. It's not if you apply housing to Karnataka, it is actually going to go down. So when we see these articles, if I were to put on my skeptic hat, then I would have to say that is a ground being set for profiteering? So we need to be careful before jumping to some conclusions. You can't, when you look at the overall context, that is when things become clearer. You blur the context and you just focus on a small point, then the fact may look different. But when you place the same issue in the broader context, I appeal to you to kindly place it in the broader context, the facts become clearer to you. The intention of GST is not to increase taxation. Yes, we hope to increase revenues, no doubt about that, but not through increase in taxation. It is, we are, wherever possible, we are trying to bring down taxation so that compliance increases and hence revenues increase. And not only through that, as has been pointed out, and as many of you, since your businesses, you're not common public, you are aware that there is a very powerful IT infrastructure being built up to ensure that GST works and that it is customer friendly. So that is another incentive we are creating for compliance as well. So through that we hope, things would be far better in the days to come. And I will give you another example where, my friend from the restaurant industry is here. We have had discussions with them in the past. They have come and approached us. We have heard them. Why sometimes things may look jarring to you. Now, in Karnataka, we have a composition scheme currently for restaurants. In other states, there is a VAT, a higher rate of VAT. We are charging only 4%, I think. Some states there is a VAT of 14.4%. Some states there is a service, on air-conditioned restaurants, there is a service tax of another 14%. 14 or 6? Yeah, when you fit it, the air-conditioned restaurants, 5% service tax plus VAT 14.5%, it comes into 18%. Because this is restaurants is one of the issues that's being talked about debated in the media. That's why I'm trying to clarify. Now, this issue was again discussed in the GST Council. So the average rate of incidence of taxation across the country, when you average it out, the rate of taxation is coming into 18%. But then GST Council took a decision that at least let us bring down the rate for non-air conditioned restaurants. So from 18%, we segregated non-AC restaurants and we brought it further down to 12%. In Karnataka, earlier there was no input tax credit for restaurants because it was a composition scheme. Now they are going to be eligible for input tax credit as well. Not only that, many states are not giving a composition scheme for restaurants in the current regime. But this issue was again discussed in the GST Council, and we said, if you are giving composition scheme for small other businesses, manufacturers, why don't we extend the same for restaurants as well? So we extended it to restaurants with a turnover of up to 50 lakhs. And we have given a composition scheme at, I think, about 5% rate. Now then the Restaurant Association appealed to us that, look, this rate does not benefit us. So then we went back and looked at our data in Karnataka. And it turns out that in the current composition scheme, about 13,669 restaurants are paying taxes in Karnataka. 13,669 restaurants. Out of which, restaurants with more than 1 crore turnover are 764. And restaurants with 50 lakhs to 1 crore turnover are 676 restaurants. The rest, 12,229 restaurants, are currently declaring a turnover of less than 50 lakhs. So, as a policymaker, as an administrator, should we not go by the data we have? So, when we looked at this data, we haven't taken a blind decision to cap it at 50 lakhs. You might think it's not based out of proper deliberation. But we looked at the data, we said out of 13,669, If we offer a composition of 50 lakhs, it is going to benefit 12,229 restaurants, which amounts to more than 90%. So, but now they tell us that no, that is not the reality, but this is the reality as you have reported to us. Where the misunderstanding between you and us builds up. We have to take decisions based on available data, not on a, yes, there are some issues where we take decisions based on a general understanding, but where data is available, we have to go by data. But now this fact is being ignored, and generally comments are being made that generally the GST is not in favor of the restaurant industry. We have tried to accommodate majority of restaurants, address their concerns, and keep them at a very low rate of taxation with the available information that we have. I'm just using this as an example. I can go on giving more and more examples like that, just to assure you that there is a but when you look at just restaurants, oh, it is going to be 12%, AC restaurants are going to be 18%, it might look a bit jarring to you. But some of them are also forgetting to mention that, you know, restaurants have also been given a composition scheme of 5% up to 50 lakhs, which actually covers 90% of the sector. So, I'm just using this as an illustration to make a broader point that when you look at a micro situation, you come out with a different understanding, but when you place it in the proper context, there is a different understanding. Now, fertilizers is another point that was raised. I'm just using these as examples. These are not limited to those sectors alone. This applies to many different sectors, many different businesses. Now, it is at 12%. So you might wonder, this is a farmer-related issue. Why have you put it at 12%? Current rate of incidence of taxation on fertilizers is already at 9.5%. Is already at 9.5%. Now, let us say we will bring it down to 5%. There will be actually perhaps a net outflow of credit if we bring it down to 5%. I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say. If we bring it down to 5%, government will actually have to pay out rather than receive any taxes from fertilizers. They have many inputs going into, they have capital inputs, they have many other inputs going into the sector. As it is, the rate of current taxation itself is 9.5%. Tractor also, Dr. Adya Saab explained already. So there are many issues, and service is another one. All these days, service sector was not eligible for goods inputs, good input tax credit. Now that is going to be permitted. And many people in common discourse, you're all informed audience here, so it doesn't apply to you, but I'm now addressing the common discourse. People very conveniently forget the effect of cascading altogether. So there was a tax on tax in our country earlier. So actually the goods which are in 28% bracket today, the net taxation on them used to be 31% because of cascading. Because there was a tax on tax. I'm sure you understand this. But people outside this hall do not understand that there was a cascading effect earlier, where it was being paid on tax, and hence the incidence of taxation was much higher. Also, now I am addressing the audience outside. People very conveniently forgot altogether about central excise because it was not mentioned in the receipt. So people looked at only VAT or service tax, and they thought that that was all the rate of taxation. So some of the informed people are also making these. So my appeal to you is that I'm not saying you should not deliberate on these issues. Do deliberate, because nothing is perfect. Everything is a work in progress. My only appeal is, take all relevant facts into consideration before we create some sort of conceptions, misconceptions about the whole thing. And there will be, the team of officers have done a phenomenal job of preparing us all for GST. In Karnataka also, under our commissioner, they have not only contributed tremendously to the entire GST process, but in preparing the state also, they have done a terrific job and addressing the concerns of the industry, addressing the concerns of the state businesses and the concerns of the state. They have done a very good job. And they have been responsive also, proactive in responding to the concerns of many people sitting here. I think Karnataka is pretty much top in terms of preparedness also to roll out GST. I think most of the businesses in Karnataka have already enrolled themselves in this. But there will still be a few hiccups, no doubt about it. But let us also look at the broader context. If 95% is going smooth, that's a huge achievement in a very complex country like ours. There may be 5% of the cases where things may bounce, things may not go through, but let us understand. Let us look at it proportionately and see where is it that we are, to what extent are we going right, and where are the issues where there may be a few concerns, and we are sure we can definitely address them. We are addressing one of the most complex challenges in the world. We have come this far. I think whatever there may be few hiccups, I'm confident our system is competent enough to handle those hiccups also. Just give us that little bit of time and space to address when and if there are such any hiccups in the whole process. Ultimate objective is a simplification of the system so that ease of doing business improves in our country, so that businesses grow in our country, so that they generate more employment for the masses of our country. We are working towards a uniform system, a simpler system. I won't now get into, I will just take half a minute to mention this one additional point. Yes, we wanted a simpler rate structure. This issue was deliberated for hours and hours in the GST Council. But in a country where compliance of direct taxation is very low, where evasion is far more commonplace than compliance, whether we like it or not, we have to rely on indirect forms of taxation. Otherwise, we would be letting the top tier off the hook of taxation in our country. But ultimate aspiration is to rationalize them into fewer and fewer rates. As compliance improves, we are hoping GST will also lead to improvement in direct taxation also. We are hoping for that also. As all those things happen, governments will also, at that time, respond to your aspirations of further reducing the slabs, perhaps even further reducing the rates also. But that is concurrent upon all of us working together, the administration as well as the assessees. But the aspiration from our side is also that numbers of rates should come down and rate of taxation should also come down, provided we see improvement in compliance and we see improvement in direct tax realization as well. But I just want to assure you that we are aware of those issues as well. Dr. Adya has very ably led this whole exercise under the leadership of Union Finance Minister. He has taken time to join us in our state and to respond and soothe your concerns about GST rollout. And I think a lot of your concerns have already been addressed by our finance department, which is also very progressive, led by Sri Prasad, and also our Commissioner of Commercial Taxes, who has been a very core member of this entire GST exercise at the national level also. So their entire team with the CBEC is with you in ensuring that there is a smooth rollout of GST in our state. I appeal to you, those of you who have not yet enrolled, I appeal to you to get on board, and the administration, CBEC and Commercial Taxes Department both will work with you to smoothen the whole process. And I thank my Chief Minister again for giving me this opportunity to be part of this GST process. And I thank Dr. Radia and his team for taking this time and to address the concerns of people and businesses of Karnataka. Thank you for the opportunity.